In the Old West, where borders shifted and power was sparse, the Puritan norms of the East didn't arrive with force. Far from the centers, the urgency to live spoke louder. Thus, morality applied in fits and starts. Gambling, ladies of the night, drink, and guns circulated in settings governed by local pacts that adjusted limits and ensured whatever order was possible. In 1843, Tom Tobin, an Irish-American, crossed the Old West and stood out on different fronts. He did well in the mountains, read trails as few could, hunted for sustenance and combat, guided caravans and expeditions, and served as a scout for the United States Army. His versatility opened paths through harsh territories and marked his fame on the frontier. In the Old West, drinking beer at room temperature was customary. Unlike what was seen in certain European traditions, chilling wasn't part of the ritual. In 1873, in towns and villages, the drink came from local productions or small regional breweries, a habit shaped by the era's routine itself and by the local circulation of beverages. The scene brings together two paths. On one side, the Oglala chief Red Cloud appears with the full headdress, a synthesis of the ritual power and the memory of his people. On the other, American Horse appears in Western attire, a holstered gun. Between them, the tension of a time in transformation that pushes tradition toward encounter and conflict with the white world. In the Old West, hunting was more than a custom. It sustained expansion. After water, securing food defined the fate of entire settlements. To live in vast and unpredictable territories, settlers learned hunting techniques, shared knowledge, and drew from the landscape what was necessary to press on, turning local resources into energy for everyday life. At the end of the 19th century, the Westerners' routine unfolded between advances and shortages. In that context, cowboys emerged as a key piece. They drove herds, supplied distant markets, and connected ranches, railroads, and ports. Between dust and rails, their anonymous work sustained part of an economy that was globalizing. It was a hard trade, but essential. From the earliest times, cure-all peddlers appeared in the Old West. They presented bottles like talismans. They promised to ward off serious diseases, keep bad luck away, and ease sorrows. In every town, the spectacle repeated itself. Persuasive speeches, bitter sips, and hope passing from hand to hand, as if salvation could fit in a bottle. In the Old West, water guided decisions long before the region joined the United States. In wide lands, scarcity and irregularity dictated routes, harvests, and disputes. Where a well arose, agreements, neighborhoods, and watchfulness were born. Between conflicts and pacts, this resource shaped borders, commerce, and lasting bonds, sustaining caravans and settlements. In 19th century California, the gold rush became both dream and risk. People from every corner crossed trails and rivers in search of fortune. Amid new routines and businesses, one habit caught on: poker. In saloons and dance halls, cards, bets, and stories mixed, uniting outsiders who lived the frenzy of the gold fever. At first glance, Killer Jim Miller was the picture of an upright citizen in the Old West. He greeted neighbors, attended church, and kept a mild manner. For that reason, no one suspected. But behind the straight tie and polished manners hid the gunman who killed without hesitation, an identity the community was slow to acknowledge. News of gold in California raced across the country and sparked an unstoppable rush. In caravans, miners and the curious crossed the West, drawn by the promise of filling their pockets and starting over. The dream of changing one's life guided each step, and the road, hard and unpredictable, became a test of courage. Some returned empty-handed, others put down roots and raised cities. In the Old West, the barbershop was more than mirror and razor. There, the one who trimmed hair also stitched wounds, pulled teeth, and prepared remedies. This mix was born when medicine still lacked institutions, and the community looked to the barber as a practical professional, capable of easing pain and keeping life moving along. On the long rides of the Old West, The cowboy's plate was simple and straight to the point. To keep traveling, he relied on cooked beans, hard biscuit that wouldn't spoil, jerky that was easy to carry, dried fruit for a quick sweet, and the coffee that woke the camps. With these items, he could cross whole days, keeping up his energy without depending on stops. Where does this custom come from? Branding cattle is an ancient practice. In Egypt, around 2700 BC, it already left marks of ownership. From there, it crossed the Mediterranean, took hold in medieval Europe, and kept going. In the American Southwest, it arrived with Spanish cowboys and gained new momentum thanks to Mexican traditions. Thus, the iron also marks a historical route. In the gold rush, each new rumor of fortune crowded the trails toward California. With the flow of prospectors, merchants, and pioneers, letters became a bridge between camps and cities. The pressure for news and business made the mail multiply and pushed expansion westward, connecting regions and speeding up opportunities there. On the Old West frontier, the routine began before sunrise and rarely gave a truce. Those who set down roots there dealt with distance, unpredictable weather, and a lack of resources. Every hand counted. As soon as they could, children already took on tasks. Some at 4 or 5 years old, learning early to plant, care for animals, and keep the house standing. At the turn of the 19th century, the buffalo hunt energized the American West and fed entire markets. In that flow, Leavenworth, Kansas became a meeting point. Warehouses, tanneries, and traders received shipments brought by hunters, who there sold and forwarded the hides for processing and distribution throughout the region. Clay Allison, a notable name of the Old West, didn't see himself as a simple gunman. He preferred to be called a shooter, a title that summed up his method: less bravado, more precision. With a six-shooter, he cultivated a reputation for drawing fast and hitting the right spot, becoming a reference in marksmanship in a period when borders and reputations were decided in seconds. The landmark of horse culture among the Plains nations arises after the Pueblo Revolt in 1680. United, the communities drove the Spanish out of New Mexico and opened a new chapter. In the tumult, they seized thousands of horses and other herds, once exclusive to the colonizers, and spread horsemanship along broad routes and alliances. In the westward expansion, coffee became a constant partner of pioneers and cowboys. In freezing dawns and endless crossings, the drink warmed, gathered people around the fire, and kept the watch. Among everyone, cowboys adopted the habit most intently. They drank to chase off fatigue, gain focus, and keep traveling. Roy Bean, born around 1825 in Mason County, Kentucky, turned toward the west early. At 15, he left home and followed his two older brothers. He advanced through diverse territories, moving when opportunities arose, and lived by various trades, always on the move in search of the next step, on a trail of risks and possibilities. The art of the lasso, a key element of ranching, was born from the meeting of cultures in the West in the 18th century. Conquistadors carried Iberian techniques that gained strength with Spanish ranchers and Mexican vaqueros. In contact with Texas cowboys, this knowledge blended and shaped practices that still guide cattle handling to this day. The Old West remains a living chapter of American culture, with strong roots in the Midwest. Literature and cinema consolidated this myth by narrating open roads, towns that arise, and borders in tension. From this weave springs an imaginary of adventure and pioneering, where each step tests limits and invites you to press on as history goes on. In the tumult of the Old West, Anna Emmeline McDoulet, Cattle Annie, appeared as a daring figure. Alongside Jenny Stevens' Little Britches, she traded youth for dusty roads and other people's safes. Still teenagers, they supported gangs, carried messages, created distractions, and, when needed, risked bank robberies to keep the outfits in action. Before 1858, when gold had not yet emerged near present-day Denver, Colorado was growing without requiring railroads. The discovery changed the game. The gold rush pulled in tracks to link mines, bring supplies, and carry wealth out. Thus, the railroads spurred growth and quickly shaped the state's future across the territory. Nearly 2 centuries ago, the Texas Rangers emerged to shape the state's destiny. Acting as a force of law and order, they traversed the vast frontiers, responding to constant conflicts and risks. Their mission was to safeguard settlements and routes, ensuring that life in Texas could move forward despite the region's tensions, a legacy that marked Texas. In the 1870s in Death Valley, a leap changed the transport of valuable borax. To cross the arid immensity of the Great Basin, robust caravans arose, designed to withstand the distances. Each convoy moved in cadence, pulled by a team of 20 mules, and thus the mineral moved across the desert, opening the way for new routes. In the photograph, Black Elk appears on the left. A key figure in 2 decisive moments in U.S. history, he took part, while still young, in the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876, a famous confrontation between U.S. forces and the peoples of the Great Plains, with emphasis on the Lakota Sioux, whose tradition he was part of. His image calls for revisiting that memory. Quanah Parker followed a symbolic path. The son of Cynthia Ann Parker, a white woman captured in childhood and integrated into the Comanche, he grew up between 2 worlds. When buffalo hunters advanced onto his people's traditional lands, Quanah became a central leader of the resistance, seeking to protect Comanche territory and way of life. In the image, 2 women pose in a brothel room in Miles, Montana, displaying carefully tended decor that contrasts with the place's reputation. The scene suggests an effort at respectability, while in that period a district judge described the town, then with something around 1,000 residents, as a place notorious for a lack of morals and the absence of legal order. In the featured image, we see a cowboy from Caldwell, Kansas, whose attire reveals the way of life in the country. Each piece serves daily work and the climate. Facing sun, wind, and rough terrain, these men adjusted what to wear. For that reason, they varied the use of chaps, coverings that go over the pants and protect the legs while working. Known as the last photograph of George Armstrong Custer, the image portrays a man who cultivated his own fame and often sought the lens. Over his life, he posed for more than 150 portraits. This record occurred 2 months before a milestone in American history, the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876. When the ambrotype, made on a glass plate and more accessible, arrived in the 1850s, the daguerreotype era began to lose steam. Among the many images that emerged, this portrait of the American West stands out. We do not know who the man is, and perhaps there lies the fascination. The photograph invites the eye to imagine his entire story. At noon in Greenwood County, Kansas, travelers interrupt their march. Beside the wagon, they build a fire, share bread and silence. The brief stop renews strength and plans. In search of land and a chance to start over, they resume the trail when the shadow shortens. Soon the call of the horizon speaks again and footsteps become wheels in motion. Joella Irwin emerged as a reference among the first cowgirls of the early 20th century. Amid arenas dominated by men, she helped make room for competitors by displaying skill and courage. From rodeo to equestrian events, she made her presence felt in various formats, attracting audiences and inspiring new athletes. Her trajectory consolidated a place for women in the sport. In 1884, a cabinet card records a scene on the San Carlos Reservation in Arizona. The photo bears a milestone. It is the first known image of Geronimo. A prominent leader among the Apache, he lived through conflicts, negotiations, and legends, and over time went from a portrait on a card to a place as an icon that echoes in American culture. Jesse James, the most famous face of the James Younger Gang, became a symbol of the Old West. At the head of bank and train robberies, he carried out a series of actions that spread his name across several states. Notoriety had a price. Betrayed within his own home, he fell dead in 1882, ending a career that had already blended with legend in history. A symbol of expansion along the American frontier, Kit Carson lived among trails and changes of occupation. He worked in the fur trade, uncovered routes as an explorer, and earned fame as a mountain man. His reputation grew when he guided John Pathfinder Fremont on expeditions that helped map the West. Over time, he gathered experiences that shaped the country's advance. This photo, taken around 1880, intrigues. No one knows for sure who appears in it. There is, however, a clue. Some historians suggest that the standing man is John Kinney. He gained notoriety in 1875 when he assumed the leadership of a gang of thieves in southern New Mexico, and his shadow seems to hover over the scene. Perhaps it is he. In 1899, Pearl Hart surprised the Old West by carrying out one of the last stagecoach robberies. The boldness echoed beyond local borders. Her name crossed the country and reached the pages of Cosmopolitan magazine. Turned into a symbol of the end of an era, she went from outlaw to historical figure, while stagecoaches were leaving the scene. At 15, Rose Dunn, nicknamed the Rose of Cimarron, entered the folklore of the West. Her notoriety was born in 1895 in Ingalls, in the Oklahoma Territory, when, according to accounts, she helped her boyfriend, an outlaw, in a shootout that pitted lawmen against bandits. The episode sealed her image and brought her to the pages of history. Long before becoming a cattleman, Texas John Slaughter patrolled the border as a Texas Ranger during the Civil War. Years later, he established his last ranch near Douglas, Arizona. From that cycle, a record remained, a photograph dated around 1885 that captures the turning point of his path and his time. Olive Oatman was marked by a journey of survival and change. Captured while still young by members of the Mojave, she lived among them and received on her chin a tattoo made with blue cactus ink. More than an ornament, it was a sign of belonging and faith. For the tribe, it would ensure a serene passage after death. Her story echoes as an example of adaptation. The Texas Rangers were born in Texas early in the 19th century. They arose informally in 1823 with Stephen Austin and gained official organization in 1835. Throughout history, they acted in the protection of the frontiers and in the capture of fugitives, becoming a key piece in the state's formation and security. Since then, they have influenced local conflicts and the advance of the law. A previously unknown photograph came to light. In it, a woman, possibly the head of a ranch, drives cattle somewhere in the American West. The record appeared by chance in the hands of writer Mark Lee Gardner, who found it in an antique shop in Missouri and brought to light a little documented scene of rural everyday life. In the accounts of the Old West, Tiburcio Vasquez appears as a symbol of Hispanic banditry. The photograph attributed to around 1865 fixes his face and foreshadows the route that would stretch for nearly 2 decades. Amid ambushes, escapes, and raids, Vasquez traveled illicit paths, accumulating deeds that consolidated his reputation as an outlaw. Life in the Old West called for attentive hands. Amid dusty trails and long cattle drives, the cowboys guided the cattle and kept everything moving. Off the roads, they sought studios to fix who they were. They posed before the camera with the pieces they wore at work: hat, boots, belt. Thus, they left a faithful portrait of a trade that marked the era. Bill Doolin, an outlaw of the Oklahoma Territory, became a valuable prize when a high reward was offered for his capture. Hunted, he remained on the run until August 1896. In that month, the chase ended in a shootout. Doolin fell after taking about 20 shots, fired by Heck Thomas, a United States Deputy Marshal, ending his criminal trajectory there. At the farewell of Tom McLaury, Frank McLaury, and Billy Clanton, a sign stood out in the procession: "Murdered in the streets of Tombstone." On the way to the cemetery, the inscription guided the collective memory to the episode that brought them there. The gunfight behind the OK Corral in 1881, a lasting symbol of the Old West whose echo still runs through history. Kate Rockwell made her presence felt in Alaska, where she enlivened miners at the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century. On stages of dust and expectation, she combined familiar songs and agile dances, holding the audience from the first note. Her red chiffon costume became a signature, and her performances left a vivid memory in the hard life of the mining camps.